to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum Extra this Good Friday, the 18th of April 2025. And it's a time that we review the major events of the week. We'll be looking at two main things. We'll be following up the debate around the cash bonanza in Parliament. Well, this week, the debate about the 100 million shillings given to MPs continued, with the opposition publishing a list of 72 legislators who chose to denounce the money. Now, this move has, however, been termed by some people as posturing. The NUP leader, Robert Kyagulanyi, also weighed into this discussion and described it as grand corruption, stressing that the money should have been used to address other challenges in the country. He advised voters to kick out the MPs and President Yoweri Museveni in what he described as a protest vote in 2026. Now, during this week in Parliament, there was a discussion on the budget. It emerged that the health sector budget alone has a shortfall of 1.7 trillion shillings. Well, there are things inside the ministerial policy statement and the report submitted by Parliament that suggests there's a shortfall of 1.7 trillion shillings, among which is working on dilapidated hospitals and also ambulances. And according to the report, an extra 54 billion shillings is needed for ambulances, and an extra 53 billion shillings is needed for rehabilitation and re-equipping of selected hospitals across the country. And people are saying the MPs should have pushed for this money to actually go and cater for this. The discussion about this issue continues, and it's largely held that this money was given to the MPs to prepare them to support the UPDF amendment bill, which seeks to reinstate the authority of military courts to try civilians. So we'll be looking at this thing in detail to understand where it's going and what we can actually do to avoid this, because people have complained a lot about MPs receiving money over and above their pay. We'll be going to the road to the 2026 general elections to try and look at some of the key developments this week, where the NRM party announced its roadmap and also nomination fees for people who want to contest under their flag. Some people have described the fees as exorbitant. For instance, a presidential aspirant, somebody who wants to get a ticket of the NRM as a presidential aspirant, must pay 20 million shillings. Those buying for MP tickets must pay 3 million shillings. Now, there are people who have already complained about this money. We should, however, note that NRM normally supports its official candidates by paying their nomination fees and contributing to their campaign. On the side of the opposition, the police blocked regional training meetings of the NUP. There was a meeting supposed to be in Vishenyi yesterday, and there is one which is planned for Gulu next week. But the police said those meetings will not go ahead because NUP is not adhering to the guidelines it was issued last year. The party leader, Kyagulanyi, is accused of defying traffic rules while in Iganga, as he returned from Mbale on Monday. He was in Mbale, where he addressed a regional meeting where they are training their people who are supposed to go into mobilization. NUP says this is part of a wider scheme to frustrate their efforts to mobilize. The police says they're simply implementing the law. Where does this take us? A year to the next elections, will political parties be allowed to actually get out there and canvass for support? My name is Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, your host. The panel: Honorable Emmanuel Lumala Dombo, Director of Information at the NRM Party Secretariat. We should say he's also the spokesperson of that political party. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum.
Good evening, Bwana Lukwago. Good evening, fellow panelists, and good evening, our listeners.
Honorable Dombo was also a member of Parliament from Bunyole, and that time he was also a member of PAFO, one of the offsprings that had come up in Parliament to challenge the status quo. It's good to have you on this show this evening. Mr. George Musisi, lawyer and pundit on governance and human rights issues, is a member of the National Unity Platform Party. Good evening, George. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening to you, Kenneth, the listeners, and my colleagues here. Pleasure to be here.
Ms. Perry Aritua, Executive Director, Women Democracy Network, Uganda Chapter, pundit on governance and human rights issues, seasoned election observer. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you on this panel, Perry.
Thank you, Kenneth. Good evening, listeners and viewers and my fellow panelists.
Mr. Nicholas Opio, renowned human rights lawyer, pundit on human rights and governance issues. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Kenneth, and good evening to my fellow panelists. For those who are not watching us online, Mr. is wearing a red t-shirt, and on my left is Honorable
Dombo in a yellow shirt with an emblem.
And Nicholas is is between us in white and Is that royal blue or blue?
Columbia University.
And there are some things that are popping out of Honorable Dombo's pocket, but I'll not tell the listener what it is. They are bulging.
It's a bulging.
No, they're party cards. He was hoping to give it to some of us.
All right. And I want to begin with you, George, on this issue of the cash bonanza. Your political party, NUP, has taken the lead in criticizing this matter. We know President Yoweri Museveni came out last week. He didn't confirm that he gave out the money, but he seemed to defend, and some people were saying he is obviously confirming that he gave out the money, but we are also told the section of MPs received, others did not receive. But we saw NUP taking a bold step, ordering its MPs to sign a document denouncing this particular amount of money. What is the latest on this issue?
I cannot have the latest, certainly, but what I can say is that, in law there's what we call circumstantial evidence. And this is where court can convict. Circumstantial evidence is about piecing different pieces of evidence together that lead to only one logical conclusion. Now, I've had a clip this afternoon of the, I don't know the designations, I think one of the president's spokespersons called Mr. Farouk Chironda, confirming, saying all our NRM MPs and our aligned independent people got money. I can also confirm, I was with Mr. Jonathan Odur, a member of parliament, and he told me that, yeah, indeed, there are many people who have confessed to me, my colleagues. Even a few of them who owed me money have cleared in the last day. So, you talked about the Mr. Museveni statement, and you said that he didn't confirm. Of course, the only inference, reasonable inference from that statement, he was owning. Actually, it seemed to be defending any disbursement, because had it been that there was no payment of that kind, the statement would also have been categorical in denying it. And then, two, you can piece up what has been happening. You don't even have to go to far away to 2005 when cash was being distributed at Mosa courts. Even in 2005, Mr. Sechikubo, who was the whistleblower then, was first denied. When he went and was denied his share, that's when he blew the whistle. But if you refer to this particular parliament, this, I think, is the third known disbursement. The first one came a year into there when they got the 40 million. They were all categorical in denying it. Actually, the denials were even not in sync. One time the spokesperson was saying, no, this is meant to be gratuity. And then on the other hand, they were saying, we've not dished out anything. And of course, we all knew, some of us who have our ears on the ground, that, so of course, these people confess privately. And until you saw a gentleman called Kagabo returning the cash, saying that actually received it. In the previous parliament, including the last one, the 10th, they used to distribute this kind of money through accounts. Remember the one of 2017, the 29 million, and it would go to all MPs, and then the opposition would, some of them would return it and so on. Now this parliament decided to be to be a little more creative. They distribute it in cash. And of course they even have different distribution centers depending on who is receiving. The opposition and some noisy independents receive from a different point, and of course government chief whip caters for the NRM. So it's true, yeah, the money came out.
Did some people from your group receive this money? Since you said there are some people who are quietly confirming that.
I want to imagine that there are some people who did. I want to imagine there are some people who did. I want to imagine there are some people who did. What happens is that this money is given to friendly opposition.
Friendly?
Oh, yes. I know that there are even some people who signed that list. Of course, for the part of the opposition caucus, it was about us disowning it public, and the best they could do is, okay, if you didn't receive it, you sign here denouncing it. And like the leader of opposition said, it's up to now the giver to shame those who signed and received at the same time, to say that, no, don't denounce because you received. But because there is some bit of guilt by association, many times the giver will not come out. What is worse about it is the not even the image of parliament, because maybe some of these people don't have a very big image to protect, but the impunity around it, that someone does this and then they come out with a very straight face and they denounce it, including when they are holding very serious offices. And then where does that leave the legislative part of parliament? Because this is akin to giving a judicial officer money to give a decision in whatever favor. because this money apparently is meant to help them. One, to
Mobilize.
thank for the legislations previously, but also, I'm sure, to prepare them for the incoming legislation, especially the one which we are looking at, the UPDF Amendment Bill. So it's meant to keep them in check. So it's paying MPs to do legislation to the tune of the person who is paying the tune. And that is the bigger dangerous bit about it. So I want to imagine that, and they have been reduced when they met, the NM caucus met Mr. Museveni shortly after the coffee bill or before. This was one of the demands they made. And now they know him, that it's scratch my back, I scratch yours.
So they demanded for the money.
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly. And it's been a trend. It's been a trend. Every time there's a very contentious issue, they try to demand something. They know that he requires this, he needs to give us something in return, and that has been the trend.
All right. We'll be coming back to you to look deeper into some of the things that you've said there. But let's go to Mr. Nicholas Opio. Mr. Nicholas Opio, your take on the developments around this money. We had a discussion here last week about it when the news had just broken. But now there's been a debate. We've seen another group saying we are not going to accept this money, although we are getting reports that actually some of them might have picked this money. So some people are saying they were just posturing with this decision of signing the 72. But also, what does this mean when something like this happens, like George is saying? Each time Parliament has to make a decision, they bargain for money.
Kenneth, we will never definitively know whether MPs got money or not. It's going to be he said, she said. Because the way that the influencing of Parliament has evolved over time is that it is no longer overt, it is covert. When we did the court case to try and force MPs to return money that was paid to them by the executive 3 weeks to the end of their term, ostensibly to go and monitor programs, the then Treasury Secretary, Keith Mukanezi, deposed an affidavit in which he was able to put a finger on a vote, on an expenditure request, and on disbursement of money to bank accounts. When he did that and made the argument that this was money appropriated in the budget, we lost the case. And the campaign to return our money then ended in a loss in the Constitutional Court, because the court's hands were tied. Look, if money was appropriated, this money is being disbursed in accordance with the national budget. Now, over time, what has happened is, because once you disburse that money, you can trace it. You can trace it. The Honorable Gambo was given 5 million shillings. The Honorable Lukwago was given 10 million shillings. We can trace it. We can track it. Now, over time, that has been obfuscated to avoid the trail of accountability. It begins as a rumor. You cannot prove it. You cannot tell if somebody was paid. So it's going to be difficult for us to focus on whether MPs were paid money. We don't have the proof. We have what my learned friend has called circumstantial evidence. You can draw inference from circumstantial evidence. For me, the two broad questions that we must discuss and focus on is the question of the emoluments of members of Parliament. Because members of Parliament have a duty to monitor government programs. They are ex-officials of district councils in districts where they come from. They're supposed to go and sit there and listen to discussion of that district. To be able to contribute, but also take views from there and bring to Parliament. They have a duty. But if you then look at the emoluments of MPs, you see payments called constituency allowance, ostensibly to allow them to be able to go back to their constituencies twice a month. But over and above that, we have had instances and cases in which MPs receive money from sources that are not within the emoluments of members of Parliament, the legitimate legal emoluments of members of Parliament. What that then means is that you don't know where the money has come from, you don't know how they're supposed to account for that money, you don't even know if they're supposed to pay taxes on that money. So it just becomes a bonanza. It opens up the window for the influencing of Parliament Imagine if a big corporation had interest in passing a law in parliament. Then they could buy a law in parliament because there's no known process of determining sources of income and emoluments of members of parliament. That is dangerous. Even if you look, let's look over and above the issue of an UPDF bill being introduced, is an incentive. If a large corporation, let's take for example Monsanto's, you had the discussion around GMO foods and the bill in parliament. Ministers came and began to give evidence that money was being given. The oil debate, there were discussions around. So we are opening parliament to influence from outside.
Lobbyists.
Lobbyists, activists, whatever you call them by whatever name. And unless you put in place a system that regulates how members of parliament earn from their official and unofficial sources, we're going to come back to this same discussion tomorrow. And of course the actors, just like Monsanto's could influence parliament to pass a GMO law, other actors could as well manipulate parliament. Hence the speculation that this was about the UPDF Act, this was about blah, blah, blah. So it's for me the absence of a system to regulate how an individual MP earns money from what source. It is even much more important than the UPDF bill. It is about protecting the integrity of the legislature from external influence. And that external must include the executive, must include the private sector, must include even unfriendly nations, you know, because MPs travel for benchmarking, visits and stuff. If we do not regulate that, we're going to end up in this same problem. The second thing is the question of the interaction between parliament and the executive in terms of financial. You see, in classical democratic systems, parliament has the power of the purse. It means that appropriation can only happen with the approval of parliament. The budgeting is done by the executive, parliament appropriates. And that no single expenditure can be drawn without the authority of parliament, without the express authority of parliament. That's why you pass an appropriation bill at the beginning of every financial year. That process here is being circumvented, it's being abused, so much so that then you have the presidency acknowledging that they have given money to MPs to monitor government problems. That should not happen. It's happened far too often because we just ignored that area of emoluments. The third thing is, and this is what I want to end with, is because sometimes I don't have to give an MP's money. I just create the rumor that I have given them money. It causes so much
Pain.
in the constituency. So that people, when they see them say, you got money, they want our share. It could also be a dangerous political tool that will manipulate outcomes of elections and public participation in the way they are governed. And unless we undertake, in my view, very stringent, strict reforms to monitor, to restrict how MPs receive money from whatever source. In fact, given how much we pay MPs in this country, it should be a full-time job. It is the best part-time job in this country. You're paid handsomely. If I am a lawyer, I'm going to my law firm, I'm in the courts. If I am a doctor, I'm running my clinic. We must make that role, full-time role, people to focus on it because of the amount of money we pay them and how we can protect them from external influence.
All right, Spectrum X on Radio 1 FM 90. The panel is discussing key events of the week. We are looking at the cash bonanza in Parliament. That was the voice of Mr. Nicholas Opio. And before that, we heard from George Musisi from the NUP. We're going to go for a break. When we return, we'll hear from Ms. Perry Aritua and then also Honorable Lumala Dombo. But we value your feedback, so please do share with us via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Spectrum Extra continues after this break. All right, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. The panel, Mr. Nicholas Opio, a renowned human rights lawyer. Mr. George Musisi is also a lawyer from the National Unity Platform Party. The Honorable Emmanuel Dumala Dombo is a Director of Information at the NRM Party Secretariat. And now coming on the mic is Ms. Perry Aritua, who is the Executive Director, Women Democracy Network, Uganda Chapter. Perry, our discussion right now, we're still focusing on the issue of this cash bonanza. You've heard from your colleagues around the table, Nicholas and George Musisi, raising a number of critical issues. The question is, how do we move away from this kind of situation? Nicholas paints a very grim picture where he suggests that our MPs can actually begin to bargain. They can actually be bought off to make certain decisions that could prove dangerous to this country.
Thank you, Kenneth. In our neighboring country, Kenya, their emoluments are actually determined by law because they have a salary remuneration system. So they don't wake up and just determine how much they earn. There's a system. Because systems have a way of checking and balancing excesses. And I think Nicholas makes an important point that we need to reach a level where we can be able to legislate on how much an MP earns, tracking the different sources from which they get money, because you don't want a situation where there's state capture. You know, where they capture them because everyone knows they want money. The Gupta brothers in South Africa. You don't, the Gupta family actually, you don't want that situation because it can have very negative influences on a country. So that's critical. But for me, it's just the timing. We are going into an election. I actually feel sorry for a number of them because I've been privy to some platforms where the citizens are saying, let's wait for this money. So they may be thinking that it's a good thing, but at the end of the day, they are going to be made to meet the personal demands of citizens. Because remember, when you take away money, which is meant for social services, then the attention turns to the MP. No ambulance, no drugs. So the citizen then starts thinking you are the point of service delivery. And the executive actually benefits from this kind of scenario. Then, because it's then not held accountable, because money which was meant for improving health, improving education, now goes into the hands of an individual. You become like a constituency development fund. In fact, I think it was Honorable Salam Musumba who said it was equivalent to the PDM, because the PDM is like 100 million per parish.
We used to have a constituency development fund. It was 20 million then?
10 million, and
10
it was
million,
removed.
Yeah.
Yes, so they are actually between a rock and a hard place. Because if I was an opponent of a member of parliament right now, my work would be to let the citizen understand the implication of taking away money from the social services to give it to an individual. You know, and then just make them realize that there's a connection between their status quo as citizens in terms of no drugs in some health centers, few officials in the health units, teachers not having houses, you know, and not being able to perform their role because they have to move a distance. So for me, it's actually an opportunity.
So you are on the same wavelength with Robert Chagulanyi, who says that the citizens should punish the president and the
agree,
MPs.
because at the end of the day, this is citizens' money, because this is taxpayers' money. So if you're taking away money from social services, then you must pay for it, because one of the things that elections do is they are supposed to create accountability. That you didn't represent well, so we remove our power away from you. And I think it's important for citizens to really see the connection between how these cash bonanzas influence service delivery. So that for me is my first take on this matter. The other is, and I think Nicholas already points that out, that if you don't have a system to check how money, if there's no system, then you find every person who wants to influence decision making in parliament uses it as an opportunity. And what it then does is two things. For those who don't have resources, it becomes almost impossible to enter parliament. Because if, for instance, you received 100 million, you have an upper hand in terms of buying the voters, because that's what our election has come to.
Buying the voter.
You buy the voter. Even when you're not capable, you use that money to buy the voter. And for me, this is where the challenge for voters it comes in. In that you increasingly, we need to take a stand in terms of the kind of representatives we want in that house. Because if someone is easily bought, how sure then they cannot represent your agenda?
Actually, just to give information, it was the Honorable Jacob Olanya who discovered this problem and began to restrict MPs going for workshops. So you must get permission from me. Because it just happened that every day MPs are going for workshops just because of allowances.
Exactly.
Not coming to Parliament.
And you see, then they are not able to play their role of oversight. That's why you'll find at times, I remember, was it the budget last time which was returned back by the president? They make decisions not for the good of the citizens, but for the one who has paid that money. So you then lose representation, because ideally they're supposed to represent the citizen's voice. But if you are playing to the tune of the one who pays money, then you have no representation as a citizen. And for me, as we go into the election, it's important to increasingly tell the citizen that if you elect this kind of person, these are the implications.
Perry, if you're given a warrant of arrest against President Yoweri Museveni and the members of parliament, who do you go for first?
The question is,
In regard to this money.
where did that money come from? And that's why the source is very important. The president's statement was very vague. I read it on. He was not owning up to anything.
He would not arrest anybody.
But the thing is, the source of that money is actually the culprit. But also you who receives, because if it's a bribe, both of you are culpable. It's not only the one who gives, even you who receives, you're culpable. But as we know right now, the president, according to the constitution, cannot be arrested. He has immunity.
All right. Spectrum is on Radio 1 FM 90. Now, let's hear from Honorable Emmanuel Lumala Dombo, the man who comes from the NRM. I don't know, maybe for him...
No, he comes from Bunyore.
He comes from Bunyore. Maybe for him, he understood the message of the president that Perry describes as vague. Wait, Honorable Dombo, once again, your political party, your government, the NRM, is being accused of trying to use underhand methods, including money, to influence processes in parliament.
Kenneth, I have been a member of parliament, and I was in parliament for 20 years. I served the highest organ of parliament, of parliamentary commissioner, where I was elected, and I believe diligently did my work. But all these problems emanate from the structure of politics and the way we finance and facilitate people to do their work. You know, my brother here, Bwana Musisi, is aspiring to go to parliament. I've not listened to his speeches, but you go to any funeral in the village and you listen to people who aspire to replace members of parliament and hear the type of accusations that they make. You'll find those aspiring to become members of parliament, they begin by buying ambulances, saying that there are members of parliament should have bought ambulances in the first place. When you open the ambulance, it is basically a box. It is a funeral van.
It is refurbished.
It would be like a funeral van that would rather carry a corpse to go for burial other than carrying people who are suffering and want support and help. Others just buy drones here and they paint them. I was very happy one time when the members of the Uganda Medical Association took a member of parliament for masquerading with a picture of a stethoscope on his ambulance, pretending to be a doctor, which he wasn't. And to me, for the 20 years I was in parliament, I condemn this. This is not what the members of parliament are supposed to do.
But that's where your governance has taken us, Honorable Dombo.
It's not governance.
This country had a national ambulance fleet. It was completely run down.
We shall get to the ambulance.
And we don't have anything. 40 years later.
We shall get to the ambulance, but let us look at the nature of politics. And let us try to define in clarity, because I've experienced all this. I've also been paid, by the way.
What I wanted to say, before you condemn the MPs, your governance has created that gap to the extent that people are looking at MPs as the ones to provide services. So when an MP buys a taxi or what as an ambulance, people are better off.
I'm not condemning the MPs yet. I'm condemning
what you have not provided.
I'm beginning with the aspirants. I'm beginning with the aspirants. That's why the problems begin. Because by the time the problem becomes a problem for a member of parliament, it is because he planted it when he was an aspirant. Because he started promising things that he did not have capacity to deliver in order to undermine the one he wanted to replace in parliament.
Okay.
So when they go to parliament, they are faced with the reality that the resources in the government may not be enough, but also the promises that they made, they cannot be met within the funding provisions that are available in Parliament. So we need to change the civic education and teaching the population what a member of Parliament is supposed to do. That's the first one. So that when they make a decision, they make a right decision.
Okay.
Secondly, for members of Parliament, you know, when you get to Parliament, there are many challenges. The first biggest challenge that members of Parliament go through, and let me tell you, there are many people who have never earned 1 million shillings in a month. And then you all of a sudden get to Parliament on the first day, and the banks, all these private banks that we have in town, swarm you with an offer for you to give you a security-free loan of 1.5 billion. I saw a member of Parliament from Wisinjiro, may household rest in eternal peace. She bought lorries to bring matoke from Wisinjiro. Wow. She bought trucks to ferry matoke, I mean milk. She bought, at the end of the day, she brought all those trucks and parked them in the gardens of Parliament because, one, they could not return the money because the people who are working in them perhaps were her campaign agents who were paying themselves in the first place. Others have bought taxis and they cannot recover. So we need financial literacy. And for us,
managing success is a problem.
And for us in members of Parliament in the NRM, when we took the new members of Parliament to Chankwanzi, this was one of the topics that was emphasized, financial literacy. And they were deliberately advised against taking loans when they don't know what exactly they were going to do. And that is a challenge which many members of Parliament, without acknowledging, many of them will not come here and tell you this. I can tell you this because I've been through it, I'm out of it, I'm no longer a member of Parliament. And when they borrow money, and the time comes toward these elections like it is now, they begin facing the wrath of it because they are overborrowed. The payment slip at the end of the month, they are getting lesser money, and now they begin getting challenges. And how do they get out of this? Either they will practice outright corruption, or they will negotiate with agencies of government, or at times they have petitioned the president for a bailout. At me, I want to talk about the bailout because I've been a beneficiary of a bailout of 100 million paid by the president. Absolutely, yes. I'll tell you, because what happened at that time, we were getting lesser money than the current members of Parliament, but we had borrowed the money from banks and at a very high interest rate, up to 30% per year, and taking big loans in order to do certain things. And when we felt we could not service the loans, and the interest rates had come down, and the banks were not willing to budge, we got an investor who had come from China, and I think it was these people who move around with money, I call it what?
You went to money
launderers.
Money shaka.
No, they were money launderers, perhaps. Somebody came with a lot of money and they offered
to buy off your loan.
to buy off the loan.
It's called a loan restriction.
And
it's a common practice in the commercial
and
sector.
when he wanted to buy off the loan and the circumstances, after we had negotiated and agreed the terms, we felt that it would be a good thing for us to inform His Excellency, the President of Uganda, because it had the ramifications. And
the question I would give you at the time you were taking this loan, did you consult the president?
No, I'm telling you, because now I'm giving you what happened. When we met the president and briefed him, first of all, he was very angry. And he said this is rubbish. He could not allow a money launderer,
a foreigner, to hijack
to come and compromise.
I remember that time.
Compromise the leaders by doing this. Then he gave us a Kinyankole proverb, which was very interesting. He said, you can only clean your ass with your hand. You cannot borrow a neighbor's hand to clean your ass. He said, if our leaders have been stupid and they have misbehaved to this level, it can only be the Ugandans to bail them out, but he cannot allow foreigners because it becomes a security problem for the country. And when the president directed, and we were bailed out as members of Parliament because of that challenge. For us as members of Parliament, and the commission then, accepted responsibility, and went to the media and explained. You see, although people had their own negative discussion about this matter, they understood because we came out and owned it.
You see,
now, the challenge you see, you had Bwana Opio here saying that we shall never know the truth. Because the beneficiaries are saying no. The president's letter is not very clear whether people were paid money. Now, those who decided, when you speak members of parliament privately, they smile. Many of them smile. They haven't said yes, but they smile sheepishly. And you begin making conclusions. This is a public relations problem that if the members of parliament knew had a challenge, now they will arm people like Musisi who wants to come back, who wants to enter parliament. He will create any reason to put there in order for him to sound marketable to the population. So I will advise members of parliament that in future, should they choose to have such challenges and they want a bailout from government, it is something that is done. They are not stealing the money. They should own up and then go and explain. The population may not be happy, but you'll explain and make them understand. It becomes easier than what has been happening right now, because now everybody is speculating. People create all sorts of things. But when I know the problem is that many members of parliament get indebted at the beginning of the session, and the matter becomes worse at the end of the session, especially with the elections beckoning at the corner.
Spectrum Xtra on Radio 1 FM night. At least we have one person here who confirms that he was a beneficiary. But Honorable Tombo, very quickly, when you say that it is the president who paid the money, I don't understand you. That was taxpayers' money. That's one thing that I wanted to tell you. But I
know that the president, the Minister of Finance.
But I also wanted to ask you, what did you give the president in return? Surely there must have been something that you parted with as MPs. Your conscience, your conscience, or what?
The first thing we did to the president is we respected him and discussed with him the problem that we had.
I mean, what did you give him?
You just don't know how powerful the president is. A president, even by law, he's only next to God. These are things people don't know, and they don't even talk about. When you have been condemned to death, you can only be hanged with his signature. He can even overturn a decision of court. That's how powerful the president is.
I've even seen people worshipping him. So
no, leave the worshipping. Now we are talking about the law and reality. So for us, we took responsibility and went and briefed the president because we knew he was in a vintage position to help members of parliament and bail them out.
All right.
And we owned it up.
The other thing that, let me help the Honorable, if you may allow me,
please,
is that there's a strategic need for intervention in cases where you know your MPs are vulnerable to manipulation, and that his intervention at the time may have been, if this Chinese man takes over their load, what else can he take from them? So there's a strategic need for intervention. The question is that there is an inherent presumption that you give me, I give you. It is now transactional, and I think that sometimes it is a strategic intervention, and not necessarily in return for something.
And you've heard from Dombo. Dombo actually tells you the president is near to God, and maybe that was what they gave up. That deep respect. Respect.
That's hyperbolic. The president is not close to God.
Well, you may figuratively take it like that, but it could mean that you cannot question the acts of the president going forward.
You actually, Parliament.
No, we did. By the way, many times we did question the acts of the president, but of course, I want to tell you that once the president has gotten the opportunity to bail you out, it weakens your ability to go and check on him.
True.
That is very human. Because you also look stupid to begin harassing a person who has just bailed you out when you should have been in prison or dying, but he has saved your life. These are real realities of life, but there are structural issues we must deal with first. First one, how do you get to parliament? And what do you promise people before you get to parliament? Can you deliver on it?
In fact, you should even go one step behind, not just how you get to parliament, and who gets to parliament. The quality and nature of MPs.
And why?
Because you see, you have people who come to Kampala for the first time. Okay, they were councillors, they were teachers, they were radio presenters, or radio jukeboxes. You know, people who call
DJs.
radios. No, you pay them to call to praise you. Eventually become very popular.
And
There
it's
were
true,
others
some
who
have
used to call
gotten
Radio
elected.
One, eventually. So those are the kind of people you get to parliament. They come here starstruck.
The last thing which
And
I
they're
wanted
vulnerable to this kind of thing.
the thing I want to end with is that I saw members of parliament, especially from the opposition, trying to do some katemba. And I remembered what happened in parliament when they had just gone parliament. Honorable Chagulanyi himself called a press conference and accused members of parliament, even from the National Unity Platform. He even created the government chief whip, this man from Bali, is called
Nambeshe.
he directed him to go and sit in parliament and wait for the members of parliament to return the money. If they could not return the 40 million, can they refuse to pick the 100?
Or give us the list of the opposition people who received the 40 million. Give us the list of the...
Now, the last one is this, and this is reality. You know, everybody, people try to exploit situations that are within their reach and where perhaps we may not have the opportunity to know. The president of UNUP receives money from government legitimately, but nobody looks at his accountability. Even this one has never looked at it.
Accountability is furnished, Honorable Dombo. Can't be...
Let me.
No, it's furnished by the Electoral Commission.
Let
I'm telling you a basic fact.
Yes, it is a basic fact,
yes,
which you are stating.
So if you're saying no,
but I want to tell you that officers that are advantaged to control votes, you can't be sure how they relate and manipulate those votes.
No, but, so what point are you making?
The point I'm saying is that the members of parliament who did not return the 40 million, they must have received 100 million if indeed it was there. Secondly, that those who are accusing others, like you saw my brother, the former leader of the opposition, nobody ever knew that he had received some amount of money until the facts had to come out at its own time. Right. Even for these ones who are accusing, let us wait for the day. Maybe time will come when we shall find out the truth.
Do you want to jump in very quickly?
I'm grappling to understand what Honorable Zem was saying. I don't know whether he's justifying the payment. What he's calling Katemba is saying, I think it's an implicit admission that for NRM we're not ashamed of taking underhand money. For the opposition, at least they can't own it publicly. So I don't know whether Honorable Dom was saying...
But isn't that the most dangerous thing, if you can't own it publicly? That's what
Honorable Of course, even the institution has not owned it. And that's what I said, even the institution of parliament has not owned it up. So that is also, I don't know why what you would term that, where a speaker of parliament sits, even for the 40 million, the speaker sat and told, even when Kagaba returned it, the speaker said, no, we've never dished out money here. So I don't know if this one who are denouncing it, calling it Katemba, what would you call that, Honorable?
All right, Perry.
I think for me the loser here is the citizen, because if you're dealing with a citizen who doesn't have access to drugs, Kampala was flooding just a few weeks ago. I don't know whether there's even a budget. You have children having to go to schools where the desks are not enough.
I've given you an example.
MPs
MPs were this week complaining about ambulances in their constituency.
Exactly. So if you have serious social service delivery issues and one person is being given 100 million for I don't know what, I mean, and that's taxpayers' money. I think the key loser here is the citizen, and that's why the election becomes important, to get rid of this person who is so selfish that they don't think about the citizen but their own.
To remove one eater and bring in another eater.
No, because you see the citizen, I mean the MP will understand that every 5 years, if I'm eating this money, I will lose that position. And I can tell you, majority of them want to come back.
All right. Nicholas Opio, you are the one who talked about emoluments of MPs. Now we hear that even what is given to them is not adequate, that they have even to take loans.
No. Back then it wasn't. Now it is. Now MPs earn a lot of money. And they've been so clever at it, by the way. Because what is subject to tax is really a basic salary. But they've padded that with so many other things.
Allowances.
That, I mean, me and you, if you have paid allowances in our work, we are taxed for it, right? The person paying me must pay withholding tax. I must report my earning, and at the end of the year, declare my income with URA in my tax returns. But the MPs have found a way to pad their income in a way that you can't even tell now how much an MP earns unless you get a pay slip. And that pay slip is kept as if it is nuclear secrets.
And I want to tell you that, you see, you are here with Mr. Musisi. Let him get parliament tomorrow. One of the things that he will hide without more secrecy. Is his payment
The
slip?
beauty is that we'll have changed the
So I
talk.
saw from Xtra already one.
No, he has just, there's actually a statement where he says he has 20 more years. That is 80.
Let's take another break. Let's take another break. When we return, we will be listening to some of the views that have come in from the listeners and the responses that the panelists will make. But also, we'll have an opportunity to actually move on to our next topic, which will be the road to 26 general elections. Look at some of the key things that have happened this week as we continue preparing for that election process. Let's go for a break now. Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Xtra live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. The panel, Honorable Emmanuel Lumala-Dombo, Director of Information, NRM Party Secretariat, Mr. George Musisi, lawyer and pundit on governance and human rights issues, member of the National Unity Platform Party, Ms. Perry Aritua, Executive Director, Women Democracy Network, Uganda Chapter, pundit on governance and human rights issues, Mr. Nicholas Opio, renowned human rights lawyer, pundit on governance and human rights issues in our country, and me, I'm called Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, your host. And let's continue with the discussion. And right now, I want us to reflect on some of the comments that have come in from the listeners. We have many of them already. I'll begin with Grace Kamanda. Grace Kamanda describes the money as corruption. It says, "Good evening, everyone in studio. I think that's corruption." That's Grace Kamanda with that comment. Then we have a comment from Ben. Can I tell Ms. Perry that we primary teachers eat raw cassava as breakfast, as those MPs swim in 100 million bonanza as they tell parents not to pay anything? Can a hungry herdsman make cattle satisfied? Indeed, we did see pictures this week where MPs, where teachers were seated at break time in some schools and they were eating raw cassava. Then we have Okello Patrick Bonyo from Busega. Please tell those NUP MPs to collect that money and bring it to me. I will account for it. Whether they don't take it, it has been budgeted for. That is the purpose. Tell the opposition to stop petty politics by making noise over small change in the pocket. We are looking at 10 trillion annually, and you are busy shouting over loose money of 100 million. Nobody is clean in that parliament. That's a comment from Okello Patrick Bonyo, listening from Busega. Then we have Okitwi Joseph listening in from Chambogo University. Says, we are not shocked about this. This is the real NRM I have been reading and hearing about. Those people are no longer ashamed of their actions. Tell my area MP to send some money. I am even going to sleep hungry. Well, I don't know who your area MP is. Joseph, please, you didn't tell us the name. Maybe you should have mentioned the name. Exactly. I would tell that MP loud and clear. Then we have another comment from Alan, who is listening in from Ruhama County in Ntungamo District. Our beloved country, Uganda, is in a precarious situation. The head of state, who is constitutionally mandated to safeguard our resources, has turned himself into the chief transaction advisor on issues that by and large promote corruption, erosion of moral fabric, and integrity. There is no way we can stabilize political governance when Mr. Museveni still presides over state capture and institutional breakdown. We have another comment. Amo Martin listening in from Bali. The mother of all forms of corruption is political corruption. The only way we can stop the cash bonanza is to officially begin to legalize it and formally begin budgeting for it. Then we have another comment from Tony listening in from Mbale. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. Classified expenditure. Hope bribes have become part of the classified expenditure. What was that the MPs were offering on the market to be paid 100 million shillings in cash? That is Wamagale Tony listening in from Mbale. NRM has successfully convinced Ugandans that the minority opposition MPs consume money that is supposed to benefit Ugandans and forget about the huge number of the NRM MPs themselves. That's a comment from Sharif. Then we have another comment. Listening to Honorable Dombo's comic remarks is annoying when young people are raising fundamental and substantive issues, speaking to the current situation. Anderson, your table panelist has a discordant ideas from Dombo. Perry, Musisi, and my alumni, Nicholas, are young thinkers with bright submission for many of us out here. In the future, as you introduce panelists, please state their ages also. Tired thinkers must create space. Tired thinkers must create space and embrace revolutionary young ones, just like the one we got in 1986. Dombo, both idea and age is odd man out on the table. Why is he screaming and raising his voice? That's a comment from Richard there. Well, those are the comments that we've got around the corner. I want to begin with you, Mr.
Richard is very violent for Good Friday. He should embrace the Lenten season.
It's a Good Friday, but the man...
No, he's among those who condemn Jesus.
Let's go with it.
Well, I want wanted to react shortly to what my brother Nick said regarding the need for a systemic change in emoluments and how the emoluments of parliament. Whereas I agree largely, I think there's a bigger elephant in the room that we ignore, the context of our politics of the day. If you realize these underhand payments have just been getting worse with time, and there's a reason why. Remember, the very first contentious payment was the 5 million. They didn't even have the guts of taking it within the precincts of parliament. It was somewhere not far away from here at Mosa Court. And of course, it was the target audience was MPs. However, they still had maybe a semblance of shame. As time went on and the life presidency was becoming more institutionalized, the more the payments. And of course, these MPs also realized that we need, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And I remember the speaker then, Honorable Kadaga, had a way of wringing the president's arm on those very contentious issues. We all remember, I think it came to the climax during the budget, the COVID supplementary budget, where MPs were given a pat on the back of 30 million. And of course, what Mr. Museveni did when the public raised uproar was throw them under the bus. And then these NRM MPs went back and got 3 times as much. He told them, just like he told the Emmanuel Dombos, that, okay, you leave the Chinese, I'll give you here. That's what happened to the COVID 20 million. So it has become a systemic, and it's not so much about a change of the laws, because they find a way of abusing it. So this parliament, the 11th parliament, of course, is taking it a notch higher, because it seems every year it has been getting this. In the first year, like Commander Dombo said, it's got the 40 million, 2023 they got the 100, and they don't even own it up. At least the payments which were always on the accounts were always owned, and then they try to justify them. Now this time, they, like I said, they became creative, and they decided, let's pay in cash, but no one owns it up. And with a straight face, they deny. Now, it's...
Nobody knows whether they were paid.
No, they admitted.
If you say nobody, it means as if no one
Some
got the money.
admitted.
Some have admitted, actually,
Yes.
and some have admitted, even publicly. So it's the bad management of resources and the payment of, and it even has nothing to do with the issues of financial literacy. I know that is a whole bigger debate about the demands of the electorate, the payments given to MPs. That's a different debate. The whole issue now, because even LCFF chairpersons maybe have demands. Who says that they don't have demands? Maybe even local councillors have demands.
They want brand new vehicles. I remember there was a meeting in Bushenyi the other day,
Yes.
presided over by the Minister of Local Government, and the chairpersons of all this were demanding for transport.
So it's been a deliberate, the Parliament has been a deliberate target of this kind of buy-offs, which are called buy-offs, and they know. Sometimes even those who are posturing, putting up a spirited fight in the face of contentious issues, it's just for purposes of raising their purchase price. And it's directly related to the politics of the day, where we have a president who won't quit for anything, and now he knows that Parliament, I can have my way. The best way of having my way around Parliament is using money. We have problems in the judiciary where we think that the recruitment process needs to be, so the process is trying to manage the other arms, and I think the best way around Parliament has found that it's through purchase in bulk.
All right, Perry, a reaction to the comments.
You see, the teacher who called about Rokasaba, it's sad. And you see, for many of us who do programming in rural areas, when you enter a classroom, these UPE schools, and you see over 100 children seated on the floor, and one teacher attempting to educate them, they have no desks, and they are not far from like the urban areas. And then you hear 100 million has been given to a person. Imagine how many desks and chairs and how many classrooms that would refurbish. For me, that's the picture that the voter needs to paint, because the level of mismanagement is to the detriment of our children. You know, and you see, when you have a class of citizens who have no education, then productivity suffers. Even these goals we have of development cannot happen. So for me, it's really a bigger conversation, and it requires a lot of soul searching. That what kind of Uganda are we really leaving behind? Because many of these MPs, majority are over 40, you know. But what is their legacy? That you really go to your constituency, see children seated in a classroom on the floor, teachers eating raw cassava, no houses for teachers, and then you're saying we are developing. For it's just common sense. Like, why not just do certain things right? That when you go back, you don't even have to bribe. People will see that because of this MP's effectiveness, we have better classrooms, we have drugs in the health centers, you know. And you see, when you leave this country and you just go to your neighbors, you know, Kenya, Tanzania, and you see certain things being done right, it breaks your heart. You go into a room where there are Kenyans and they are all laughing and saying, you guys, what's wrong with you? Just a few weeks ago, I was in Kenya and they are complaining about their roads. Then one made a comment that you go to Kampala, it's a ghetto. You know how that makes you feel? Because you have floods and no one can move. Just for me, it's having a heart for this country and saying that we need to do things better. And we don't need to waste the little resources that we have. The health budget, you said it's about less by about 1.7 trillion. You know, and then you're here giving almost 52, I don't know, is
53 billion shillings.
53 billion, you know, allegedly to mobilize. For me, it is
to
what
monitor
I would call
government programs.
It's wrong.
All
That's
right.
the basic.
Right.
It's wrong.
Nicholas.
Well, I just wanted to make a brief comment about the ageism. I think it is important to hear from everybody, because if you begin to say on account of age, you shouldn't hear the Honorable Emmanuel Maladumbo, we really would have a big problem. And so really, really, I think, in my view, important to hear everybody's perspective, because there are things he knows that we don't. You know, his negotiation with the Chinese investor who was
brought us a different perspective.
yeah, you know. So I think it is important to hear him out and give him space to let us know some of the things that we have no idea about.
Honorable Dombo.
I want to thank the people who have responded. And I want to thank Nicholas, because I was going to give exactly the same answer, that because of my age, it helped me to be in Parliament earlier.
Yeah.
None of you here has been in Parliament.
True.
So you can take the benefit.
I was there, but in the corridors.
You are there as a journalist. So you may take it or leave it. But I didn't come here to please anybody, but provide information, and the listeners are free to pick what they need and what they shouldn't. Secondly, it could be because of, I don't know whether it's my energy. It's what? At times, many people listen to me and tell me, even at my party headquarters,
that you're very loud.
They withdraw the microphone and say you can speak without a microphone. I don't know whether they...
I think it is the North Court in you that still lives.
I don't know
All the habits die hard.
But Kenneth, I want to tell you that President Museveni has been magnanimous. And in the 40 years he has been a leader, there are things he has done which perhaps no other leader had done. For instance, funding of political parties. Not many countries do fund political parties directly. But right now, the people who complain about health centers pick money for their political parties and they do work for political parties. So money which is budgeted to do certain things, it does those things that are supposed to be done. President Museveni has supported private sector, business people. He has supported the members of the public when they fall sick. He has helped, he has bailed out members of parliament. He has helped religious institutions. Because whenever there is a problem, when there is a celebration in Namgongo, or there is a problem in the Uganda Muslim Supreme community which requires to be supported, he has used his office to support, like he has done members of parliament. Could be in the future.
Honorable Dombo agreed the president does help, but you say the most painful thing is that when it comes to issues of service delivery, we are told unfunded priorities, but the president has money to give around. For instance, if you're supporting somebody to go abroad for treatment, why don't you support Mulago Hospital to provide that particular treatment here, so that majority of Ugandans can benefit from the same treatment in the future.
Even when you support Mulago to have all the things, time will come when you need to do a medical referral, depending on the nature of disease
Agreed.
and the difference in the expertise in the different communities and the technology. Those things will happen.
The president has a donation budget that is even bigger than budgets of
The
some
members of parliament
public
should ask
entities.
the hard question because they're in parliament to do their work. You should not skin me. When I was in parliament, I was asking the hard questions when I was there. Let the members of parliament who are in parliament do their work.
All right. It's that time when we move on to our next topic of discussion, and we are going to be looking at the road to the 2026 general elections.
He's
And
asking me as if I'm in parliament.
there are key issues that have already come up on the political landscape, including the NRM actually coming out with its roadmap. And I want to begin with you, Honorable Dombo, on your roadmap and the fact that you are now kicking into, is it the second gear, third gear? I don't know. Into your preparation for the next election, announcing even monies that people are supposed to pay for nominations. People are wary about what is likely to happen in your primaries. Let's begin from there. Because of what you have seen in the past, Honorable
You
Dombo.
know, I'll begin with the issue of the money. I'm so surprised that people in Uganda want to glorify poverty. That people, when they aspire for offices and you to give them nomination fees, that you begin saying that you are, you know, when we make laws in this country, those who are choosing NRM for making this nomination fees to be discriminatory, they should know that the law itself discriminates. When you say the people of 18 should vote, somebody of 17 will ask, why not me? Because you have used the law to discriminate. You have made a discrimination to say those in senior 4 should not come to parliament by saying it is only senior 6 or its equivalent. That is a structure that has been created by the law in order to get people who should access certain public offices. It helps to eliminate, but also perhaps the lawmakers thought that when a person reaches that level and is of that qualification, that perhaps he should be able to conceptualize and understand the things that are debated. But going to the roadmap, I want to tell the public that this week we launched the Right Honorable Secretary General, Bwana Richard Todwong, launched the NRM roadmap. The roadmap included both the political and the election roadmap, including the regulations that are going to be used, and also the register that is going to be used in the internal elections. I want to tell our listeners that NRM is not like other political parties which select their flag bearers. For us, we elect. So because we elect, we are supposed to have a register. You know, the number of independents in parliament are more than the biggest opposition party in their current parliament. And one of the reasons is because of the bad elections that we had in the NRM last time. And in order to solve this lacuna, we have invested in creating a register that should be used to conduct credible elections if the election officials follow the guidelines and follow the law. Because having a register is a different thing, but putting it to fruitful use is also another. Now we must go into civic education to teach the voters how they expect to behave, because our voting is by lining in the back. The other one, which has come out and people keep asking, in the recent launch of the register, people discovered that membership in the NRM is more than 20 million. And everybody is asking, how did you get to this? We say you wait for the time of elections. Go to our villages, which we use as the smallest point of interaction with the voters. Our branch is at the village level. So because of the interaction and the closeness of the branch with the members of the NRM, it is easier for members of NRM to go and register. And besides that, we register from 16 years and above. Those who attest with their mouth that they are members of NRM and they are willing to abide by the regulations and conditions within the NRM. So we have launched the roadmap. We have finished training the election registrars, which we did the election officials. Dr. Tango Doi and the NRM Electoral Commission did the training. And at the end of this month, we are going to invite expression of interest for the people who wish to contest in the branch level. And once we do the elections early, around 6 May, for the branch level, electing the chairman, vice chairman, the branch leaders, then the election is going to be escalated up to the end of May, when we shall have fully constituted district conferences, and the district conferences are going to elect officials who are going to go to the delegates conference in Kampala. The NRM delegates conference is both elective for the structures of the leadership of the party, but is also supposed to elect the national chairman and the other members of the Central Executive Committee. It is also supposed to elect the NRM flag bearer for the office of the president. And once that one is done, we shall be ready to go with the nomination and the campaigns and the election, and we shall be ready for the swearing in of the next government come next year, inshallah.
All right, let's hear from you, George. What's happening in your political party in preparation for the 2026 general elections?
Of course, before I go to that, I need to clear a fallacy or a narrative created by Honorable Dombo and the like. They know that the NRM is the only which holds
Party primaries,
which elects. Democracy has very many facets. There is not a standard as long as the key foundational principles are there. That is why in some countries, people don't even elect a president. They elect a party, and the party elects a president. In some countries like the US, popular votes don't translate into winning the presidency. There's what they call electoral colleges and so on and so forth. But even if you interrogate the statement that they elect, the last by-election of Kawempe North, did the NRM ever hold primaries for its candidate? Let us look at how practical it is by that of lining in the back, where they say that in a constituency they have 200,000 people.
Which constituency?
Kawempe North, you said you had a register of 200,000.
Who said that?
Your candidate. But let me make my point. Okay, you can say 100,000. How do 100,000 people line up for 2 hours in the back? How do you count, assuming a village has 20,000 people? How do you have an election? So it's just a fallacy. It's just a fallacy. It's a mockery. And that is the reason why even in Chisoro you had someone coming out that was rigged, and in this one. How are we preparing? Of course, the preparations for elections have not gone as any different from what we've always seen. This government does every time when we go into the general election. There are bigger issues, and some of them have been stickier issues all along. The issues of are they interested in having a credible elections where all parties are given an equal chance to participate? You hinted, didn't you, in your preamble that for the last 18 months we have had a thorny relationship when it comes to mobilization. Police once in a while clears. Now we used to have a go at them at you don't have a right to offer permission for people to assemble. You can only, now they change the word, they use it clearance. We didn't give you clearance, as if clearance and permission have very different meanings. But when you hold one event, they're always looking for a scapegoat. And it's so standard. Their reaction is always very standard. Even after an event, they come up. No, the other day, one of your cars got an accident, so we are stopping. The other day it rained, so we are stopping. The other day you waved to people in Iganga. So it's been that kind of relationship for the last 18 months. And yet, actually, political party activity, ideally, should be an ongoing thing, because parties are supposed to mobilize, parties are supposed to reach their voters, their members, parties are supposed to reach out and mobilize them. So it's been that thorny relationship, and it's even going into this election. There are bigger issues regarding the laws, the electoral laws. But even with these current laws, we are seeing the sad hand of security, where there is a direct interference, where the security thinks that it's the enforcing arm of the ruling government, that they have to have a vote and hand all over the party's activities. And so it's been that kind of, and the reason why the NUP say that termed this as a protest vote, akin to one time FDC termed it as a defiance vote, and it's in light of the circumstances, that in light of the circumstances of what is prevailing, that even with all these thorny issues, even with this sad environment, it's a call on to the people to come up and show their resilience, just like we saw recently.
So you're going in an election similar to what happened in 2021. That's what you're telling us.
Of course, the circumstances haven't changed. Circumstances haven't changed, and some of those circumstances, it's a call on to the people that come and defy. Similar to, you saw what the target, the ideal of Kawempe. The idea was that the arresting the candidate right on nomination, very brutally beating up supporters. The essence was to send a message that this is a done deal. Your vote doesn't count. This is a military operation. Because the NRM has always approached every election like a military operation. That is why all arms of the state, that is why security agencies all come out for purposes of managing the election. And that is why that has been one of the biggest issues we've had with the EC, that you're in charge of the election or is it security? So it's a call on to the people to come up and resist.
Perry.
On what?
We are now discussing 2026 general elections.
Okay, I'll start with the NRM primaries. I'm hoping that what transpired in the last primaries will not happen, because I think a day to the election, the primary election, the president announced the voters register would not be used.
Yes.
And that was a recipe for chaos. I can tell you, we observed the election and I could not believe what was happening. You know how you'd line up and people are pulling you from one line to another, because, you know, there's this thing that if one has a longer line, people always swear to where there's success. But it also goes against the standard for, like, there's a standard for elections universally, that they must be regular, they must be free, and they must be secret. And there's a reason for secrecy, so that my choice is not determined by the onlookers. Now, people at times joke that, oh, it's okay, you'll be fair. No, there are people who actually face violence as a result of lining behind a candidate who was not the choice of the one who has power. And here I speak about women especially, you know, where their choice is predetermined by the spouse. Because the spouse is supporting candidate X, the expectation is the wife will vote accordingly. And yet we have the quality of the vote, which is supposed to be a prerequisite, and it's in the law, and that every voter should exercise their right through secrecy. So I am hoping that even as the NRM organizes its primaries, that they will stick to the rules, because certainty is so critical in an election. If everyone knows that the voters' register shall be the basis for voting, then, and you move away from that, it then defies the importance of certainty being core to free and fair elections. This last, and I think Honorable Dombo said something which is important, the training of the election officials. I think that's a good thing, and I applaud them for doing that, because one of the reasons why elections at times don't go according to plan is when the people who are managing the election have no clue in terms of what they need to do. But that can also only happen, like they can be able to do their work well if the rules are not changed midway. If you're saying we're going to use the voters register, stick to it, so that everyone who comes to the polling station knows this is exactly what will happen. So it's maybe it's something that I don't know whether this time it will change or it will not. The last for me is I hope they can allow this election to be monitored. Because one of the things that monitoring does, it enables a political party or even government to improve its system of choosing their leaders. So if they can abide by the standards for free election, the secrecy, that's why when they talk about lining up, I'm like, this particular standard, as long as you don't abide by it, there will always be issues. You'll disenfranchise certain people, and you will not know whether this was actually my choice. Because if I know I'm going to be beaten because I chose a candidate who was not the one my husband wanted, then I may not participate, or I will just go with the flow, but that's not the person whom I stand behind may not be the one who was my choice. So for me, that's my take. With regard to the process of vetting candidates, it's acceptable. I mean, every political party has a right to choose the kind of method that they use. What is important is that it must be transparent, it must be fair. That even if NUP, for instance, is saying we are going to vote the candidate, we are going to vet our candidate, the rules must be known to all those who are participating. They must show that the process is fair. And the only way they can do that is share the guidelines and ensure that those who are participating have confidence in the guidelines and that they follow those guidelines as mentioned. Because one of the things I also must say, that at times this vetting process can be manipulated. We have known instances where money exchanges hands, and at times even other things happen to be able to get that ticket. So that's my take.
And on the political environment, very quickly before we go for a break, Perry.
Of course, I've just read, I think, the candidate for Zimbabwe, the woman aspirant for
Nina
NUP,
Rose.
Nina Rose, her consultation was stopped. I think it's wrong. Because if you're saying people need to prepare for an election, they must be able to consult, because how will they prepare if the basic rules are not adhered to? And you see, the only way you can guarantee a fair election is if the rules are applied equally. That NRM is allowed to do its work, NUP, FDC, because at the end of the day, we the voter, we want to be able to hear these candidates. We want to be able to know these candidates. So if you are stopping another political party from doing their lawful work of consulting, of presenting themselves, then you are denying us our right to choose a candidate of our choice.
Spectrum Xtra on Radio 1 FM 90. Let's go for a break. When we return, we'll hear from Nicholas Opio on the road to 2026 general elections. I'll also begin, sort of ending this discussion by looking at some of the key takeaways from the discussion we have had today. So stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. Keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. We're glad that you're still with us on Spectrum Xtra, reviewing the major events of the week. Today we are looking at two things. At the beginning, we looked at the cash bonanza in Parliament, but now we have shifted our gears and we're looking at the road to 2026 general elections, try to look at some of the key issues that are happening. The panel, Honorable Emmanuel Maladombo, he is the Director of Information at the NRM Party Secretariat. Mr. George Musisi, lawyer and pundit on governance, is from the National Unity Platform Party. Ms. Perry Aritua, Executive Director, Women Democracy Network, and Mr. Nicholas Opio, human rights lawyer and pundit on governance and human rights issues. Nicholas, let's hear your take on the happenings as we prepare for the next elections in our country.
Kenneth, by this time, in previous elections, there will be a beehive of activity. There will be civil society, election monitoring groups, doing all manners of civic engagements. You'll have the Electoral Commission doing voter education. But maybe I'm in my own world, but I don't feel the election fever.
You're right.
Upon ourselves. What you see is that the NRM is being super methodical in the way that they've been doing their things. You can argue about their internal democracies, because I think some of the proposals they're having is really, I think it might be detestable. The raising of nomination fees, sticking with the lining up as a method of voting, those issues notwithstanding, but you can see a process. But what you also see is a state-orchestrated attempt to block other entities seeking to participate in the election. You have the Lukwago group, I don't know the name of the party, who have applied for registration.
PPPF.
Applied for registration. Nobody wants to register them. You have fighting to register the amended constitution. Their functions are being stopped while the other functions are going on without hindrance. So you can begin to see a carefully calibrated process to hand advantage to the party in power over and above the others. You can also argue about civil society completely shut out of this process, because my sister Perry in the last election spent nights in prison, in a police cell, for simply observing elections. Now the rules around election observations are so inhibiting that you can't have active citizen participation in observing the electoral process. The organization shut down because they attempted to put out a report about the election. And so I think that the conditions preceding the election are not, in my view, very productive and conducive because of the restrictions being placed on different actors. The last thing is this, that you have, in my view, you have electoral actors, parties in particular, that also don't seem to be internally prepared in the way and manner in which the obstructions notwithstanding, you have no attempt, for instance, visible attempt, for instance, from traditional political parties such as the FDC, the branch that is left at Nagana Kubi. You don't see an active DP role. Jema is in a presidential dispute with the Soman Basharewa. And so you also begin to see that in spite of the restrictions placed on these parties by the system, there is no visible attempt from many of them, except perhaps NUP. NUP is doing its best, and that's why all the time there is headwinds. But all the rest appear to be docile, doing UPC. You don't even hear any activity of UPC towards the election, much less discussions about whether they will front a candidate, who that candidate is going to be, what is the process of electing that candidate. And so I think for me it is really a serious, this election will be a lot more low in quality than previous elections, because the preparations leading up to it have been really lackluster. Lastly, the issue of electoral reforms. You know, you learn from every election. Even if the election was good, you learn something from it, and you commit to a process of reform. In our case, we have reforms that have been directed by the Supreme Court. There's no visible attempt to try and, even the High Court, there are no attempts to try and improve the election through electoral reform processes. Even just structurally, you have an electoral commission that many view as incompetent, if not partial, as a partisan group, and there's no attempt to try and bolster public confidence in that commission. What we're seeing is people digging in and trying to hold on to what they have because it benefits status quo.
So you want to agree with people who are saying we have no business conducting elections in our country?
No, we have every business conducting elections. You see, people who say that focus on the presidency, and you understand why. That for as long as President Museveni is on the ballot, he will declare himself winner regardless of the outcome. There is no possibility of losing elections if he's on the ballot.
Honorable Dombozo actually disbelief. He doesn't believe it.
It is true. It is true. Either out of strength or manipulation, he's just not going to lose elections.
All right.
But you have lower level elections that incredibly has a high turnover, has a way to energize local issues, and many times they produce a new crop of leaders. And I think for me, for those reasons, elections become important. But also with every election you have dynamics changing and people being energized in local ways that you can't even imagine. In my village, there's now a hot contestation whether the MP was bought off by the NRM, Call Anthony.
The boxer.
Yeah, the boxer. And there's a whole lot of discussion that's beginning to happen because, so elections are really important. They may be violent, they may be bad quality, but they present a chance for us at the local level to redefine the debate and discussion.
All right, let's bring in Honorable Dombo, the man who looked at you when you were saying that Museveni will declare himself. Honorable Dombo, according to the submissions made by Mr. Nicholas Opio, it's you people who are denying this country an opportunity to move forward democratically. For instance, no electoral reforms, despite several recommendations from election observers, courts of law. Recently, Mao telling Parliament, as far as he's concerned, he has been chased away from cabinet. He tried to take there an idea of electoral reforms, and he was told, go away.
I think it is hyperbolic again. Say it was chased. I don't think a minister.
That's exactly what he said. That's what he said on the floor of the House, that he was chased.
I don't sit in cabinet, so I don't know what happened in cabinet. But like I told my brother, Honorable Mpuga and his friends, that they have tried to dramatize the issue of electoral reforms, but when they had a lot of time, during the time when he was the leader of the opposition, members of parliament could do their work because the law allows them to do so. They could face challenges if the numbers are not enough, but it doesn't prevent them from attempting so that they can give us the reasons why they have failed to do so. Like my brother Nicholas has said, every previous election creates a learning opportunity, and we should make subsequent elections much better than what we had because of the experiences we have gotten. I want to thank the members of the National Unity Platform, because recently they have been engaged in some discussions with the police, especially when they conducted the tour in Western Uganda, and all of them got surprised that it was very successful and very peaceful.
You were surprised.
No, themselves.
That's how it should
Your
be.
mandate as a spokesperson only to the NRA.
They said it on the media because they said we expected to be arrested, they expected to be harassed, but they were left and they did the tours. And from that time, there had been constructive engagement. I want to encourage them that they should continue engaging with the
brief of
with the
Honorable Dombo doesn't end without no, even when this end whatever
not because
discussion.
we are facing one another. No.
You're the biggest
The
opposition.
national, unless you don't know that we are the biggest opposition party in Uganda.
So your brief is about talking about the biggest opposition party.
And you are putting on red, it is the most dominant color here. So you are very conspicuous, and definitely we shall talk about the things that you do or the things that you fail to do. And especially if they have the impact on the peace and the security of the country. So
He read
talk
the
about those who have failed for 40 years.
I'll just encourage you that continue talking. Recently, I liked the Prime Minister, the Katikiro of Buganda, during the mass for the celebration of the Kabaka's birthday in Rubaga. The advice he gave to Honorable Matthias Impuga and the principal of UNUP, Honorable Chagulanyi, it said keep talking. That is good. Because people should talk. And if people don't talk, then they will fight. Because you are going to complain people are not talking. They are fighting. Why they fight is because they don't talk. So keep talking. And me, I like that one, and I want to applaud the Katikiro of Buganda. And I want to advise my brother Chagulanyi and Matthias that take up the issues and the advice that you got. So that
the chairman to talk to Dr. Vesity.
So that the chairman has talked to everybody, even those who have been shooting against him. They are seated in cabinet, working with him.
Well, his son wants to
So,
kill.
no, if he wants to kill, who has stopped him?
I will advise him to talk to the people who wants to kill.
So those are things that. Then on this one of spouses who line up, I know. I know
how you conduct your
I
private
have been
primaries.
in elections, and I've been to areas where women hid their affection for the candidate they had, who was me at that time. But the only mistake they made was to celebrate my election, and that became a very huge problem for people. In many areas, husbands direct women to feign ignorance or sickness, so that during the election they must be guided on how to vote.
True.
Having a secret ballot may not be absolutely sure, but for us the choice of lining up as a method is more transparent, but is also cheaper, because running an election in 72,000 villages of Uganda, we have more polling stations in NRM than we have in the Independent Electoral Commission. It is something that can be debated, but this is going to be the second time we are going to run an election by lining up. But the first time we are going to do it with a register. Let us try to see what happens and if there could be areas for improvement. The final one is that people should know that conducting an election or any democratic process has its cost implications and can be expensive. Previously, the members of parliament for nomination who have been paying 2 million shillings in NRM. This has been revised to 3 million to equate the one that is charged by the Independent Electoral Commission. Even the other offices, from the national chairman and the presidential flag bearer, that one has been enhanced from 10 million to 20 million. For somebody who really aspires to be a president of Uganda or to lead a mass party like the National Resistance Movement, he must be able to afford 3 cows. Because 200 million shillings is about 3 cows. People go to marry wives and they pay more. What about really running the affairs of the country? You must be able to, you must be an example that you are a wealth creator, that you are not coming here just to pick and take. So people make all comments, but for us, this is the way. Should I tell you something? People paying 3 million shillings for nomination. Supposing we have 3,000 candidates for members of parliament. Last time was around that figure. This is already 9 billion shillings. 9 billion from only members of parliament. If you add other offices, it could easily come to about 15 billion. This can defray the costs of running the election and the exercise without us being accused. Even when we do this and raise this money, somebody will come here and accuse us of dipping the arm in the coffers of government.
18 billion from government.
No, that is true. No, that is true. We receive money because of our proportional representation in parliament.
That unfair formula.
And that's why we want even members of parliament to increase. We are trying to be credible, to reduce on the independence, and we have more NRMs so that we can even get better money to fund the activities that NRM is doing. This is legitimate money, and I want to tell you that we account for it.
You can start by doing better offices.
Yes, George. So now that we are in this kind of situation where
he said that we could do what?
No, let me listen to the moderator, please.
Because right now, I want to tell you that the recent Central Executive Committee meeting which sat, it approved the drawings and the contractors, and very soon the national chairman will be launching the construction of the new building once all the paperwork has
we should mention that is one which was fundraised over 20 years ago. They are beginning construction.
There's a farmers newspaper cutout which has been making rounds of Mama Mbaba's announcing the construction of the NRM house.
That one should demonstrate to you that we don't use government money to do that. If we were using that, we should have done that so many years ago. But we have been accumulating as we fundraise. But now, the national chairman assured us that we have accumulated enough money to begin on the construction.
It can also be the other way around. For you to actually tell us if we were stealing government money, we would have the NRM house now. So it can also be the other way around. Not so. Chemical Dombo. But let's move on. Now that NUP has not been allowed to get out and mobilize, what are you going to do? What will be your strategy heading into this election? Because one of the things I've heard people say, NUP has no structures, NUP is a wind to be blown away. In fact, let me bring it even closer to home. The NRM is busy here in Buganda trying to take back what used to belong to them. And you're seated in your offices, Mr. Musisi.
But they were in Zimbabwe.
But how does wind sit in an office? Anyhow, I want to put the debate in a more serious perspective. Of course, some of those narratives are just narratives that are always created by people who would wish to reduce the debate. Of course, you don't expect me, Kenneth, to discuss some of the key party strategies on air. But most importantly, regarding what preparations, some preparations can go on. And regarding this issue of structures and this is wind, I think people just need to understand the political dynamics of the day. And I think there are people who think that politics is static. People should know that political parties, by their nature, are vehicles for a particular, and people are always free to move in and out. That is why we just 2 days ago we had a function where we had 2 sitting MPs crossing, and I know there are 2 who are on the pipeline.
Crossing to where?
Crossing to NUP.
Which MPs are those?
Honorable Mpalanyi and the Honorable Fortunate from Rakai district. They crossed over. They are on DP ticket.
They were on DP ticket.
Yes, and I know there are 2 others who are just waiting for the threshold of May, who you will know soon. But the issue is why this question they're asking me that NRM is busy regaining Uganda are the questions that made people vote against, because it was a protest. And if people don't address that, people actually went to polling stations to vote. It was a protest in 2021. I don't think that people were carried by wind. So for me, every person who is singing that narrative, it's a narrative that needs to, which is not properly diagnosed, because people went to vote and they voted in a protest vote. So the question is, the issues that led them to vote in such a manner, have they been resolved? I remember the lady who is now the IGG, when she was Minister of Kampala, in 2016, told her boss that, we are going to turn Kampala yellow in the next election.
When she was at Kawempe Market.
Yes, she was at Kawempe Market. Said the next election, we're going to turn the whole of Kampala yellow. And there was a lot of money sunk into, because NRM's solution to every problem is either throw money or beat people out of it. So the people who voted overwhelmingly in the manner in which they voted had a reason, and it was a protest vote. And I know that Nicholas was talking about UPC. I've seen some of the movements of UPC, especially in the Lango region, and I know that they are also going to protest quite strongly, and I know that UPC might
will regain its stronghold.
May regain its stronghold of Lango. So there is nothing that I've seen that made people vote against NRM in 2021 that has been addressed to say that no, this issue has not been addressed, and I think they may vote differently. The only question for us as change-seeking forces is, how do you galvanize your strength? How do you have more people on board? Because if you look at the turn-up of the election, it was just 54% in the last general election. 54% of it, with all the problems of Mr. Biabakama's commission and register. It was just 54%. So how do you ensure that you have more people on turn up on the voting day? Those people voting by silence, those people who don't turn up. Then there is the bigger question of the Electoral Commission. Recently, I had a meeting with together with Honorable Narukol and my Secretary General, with the chairperson of the EC and the commissioners. And in his own words, which I can even quote on air, was that he had never seen a by-election with all the irregularities that can happen, like it happened in Kawempe. He had never seen a by-election in Kampala, which has less than a 15% turnout. So those are the issues that we need to address. And it's not an NUP. You lose the point if you look at it in the lenses of the NUP NRM, because what happens when 85% of the decided voters don't turn up to an election? Do you think they are approving? And what happens? You're having a very aggrieved and angry population that you just need a spark, like we've seen in the past. And that cannot help any person irrespective of our political parties.
All right. Very quickly, Nicholas Opio, your closing remarks. We're coming to the end of this show.
Well, a very, very happy Easter season to those who believe in the Abrahamic religions. And those who don't, happy holidays. That's all I can say.
All right. Honorable Dombo.
I want to thank everybody, especially the panelists, for the civil manner in which this debate has been conducted. I enjoy when I talked when I was beginning here, and I said I'm one of the admirers of the depth of Nicholas Opio's arguments, especially legal arguments.
Thank you, Honorable.
I follow his tweets, articles. At times he puts some acid. Some acid in there.
For flavor.
But the humor that binds us together as a community, and I want to encourage many people to talk to one another and discuss.
All right. Perry, your closing remark.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you so much.
I think the moral fiber of this country lies in us trying to do the right thing in whatever position of leadership that we have. Yeah, for me, I find it obscene for an individual to take 100 million when children in this country still sit on the floor and teachers can hardly afford their basic needs of life.
That's why you close it.
Yes.
Well, for me and the panel here in the studio, we want to wish you a fabulous weekend. We are going to a weekend, but it's also an Easter holiday, so enjoy yourselves, take care of yourselves.
By
The MPs,
You should just.
By the way,
the MPs are coming to the
Kenneth.
constituency.
Kenneth, recently we celebrated the birthday of
The Kawaka.
the Kawaka of Uganda. I was very fine, but alleged I did not participate in the mass and the others. But one thing that was very pleasant is when I heard that the Kabaka of Buganda, the current Kabaka Mtevi, is the longest serving Kabaka on the Namlondo in the history of Kabaka. And the period he has been there coincides with the period NRM has pretended.
All right, we have to take this discussion to an end. Wish you a fabulous weekend, and thank you very much for tuning in. Keep listening to Radio 1 FM 90 for great songs and great memories.